Welcome to another edition of the Monday Morning Tennis Rant on a Tuesday. Some of these tournaments are spilling into Mondays, so I wanted to make sure the Cincinnati final ended before I released this video. But before I talk about Sinner winning his third Masters Series tournament by beating a resurgent Frances Tiafoe, I want to talk about some of the hot topics, if you will, from the previous week. And Iga, during an on-court interview after a match, said that the season is too long, that it's tough on the players. And it's not the first time that she said this. And Iga is right. However, her statement is unfortunately not accurate because the long season doesn't affect players the same way. So let me tell you my opinion about the tennis calendar. And it is a weird calendar, but it's weird for a reason. And it's been like that for many, many years. Ever since I started following tennis, which is close to 40 years ago, the calendar hasn't really changed much. Yes, some tournaments have gone by the wayside, some tournaments have been added, but the big ones have remained the same and mostly have kept the same dates. And that is for a very specific reason. Have you ever wondered why the Grand Slam tournaments are so jam-packed together? The French Open, Wimbledon, and the US Open happened so close to each other. Well, you have to take into account the weather. You can't have the US Open in November and you can't have the French Open in March. It has to happen when the weather is still good. And in Australia, the reason why the Australian Open happens right off the bat, which is something that's so strange that you have a Grand Slam tournament with very little preparation, just a couple of weeks in January to prepare for the Grand Slam. Well, from what I've been able to read is that the date fits with the Australian summer. And if you put it later, it's going to be more difficult for people to attend. Now, anyone from Australia that can educate me on why the Australian Open happens in the third week of January, please feel free to do so. So what I've been noticing in the social media space is that once the US Open is over, the tennis social media creators, especially on YouTube, see a dip in views. So I think generally there's a lack of interest for tennis once the US Open is over. Of course, the hardcore tennis fans follow the tennis season all the way to the bitter end. And unfortunately, the year-ending tournament for both the men and the women, which used to be called the Masters, has unfortunately lost in its relevancy. This used to be a super important tournament held at the Madison Square Garden. Then the men's Masters was held in Germany, and it was a really spectacular event when it was held in Germany. And then unfortunately it started shifting locations for both the men and the women. And my opinion is that that tournament has lost a little bit in relevancy. But tennis is not all about the big tournaments. There's a lot of other tournaments. There are 250s, there are 500s, and there are 1,000 level tournaments spread out throughout the year. But that's not all. There are also challenger tournaments every week, and there are also futures tournaments. And Davis Cup unfortunately has been ruined, but Davis Cup used to be held after the Masters. So yes, the tennis season is brutal. There are a lot of tournaments, but now I'm gonna blow your mind. You just heard me say that there are tournaments through the entirety of the year all over the world, but yet players seek out exhibition tournaments when they're not playing a real tournament, so to speak. And to your surprise, there are a lot of top 100 players on both the men's and the women's side who play club tennis in Europe. More specifically, it's Germany and France that pays the best. And yes, there are top 100 players playing club matches. So of course, one would wonder, how can the season be too long when these players are seeking out tournaments that have nothing to do with the professional circuit? Players also don't shy away from playing a prize money tournament here and there, and this is not recorded anywhere. So basically, players are looking at every opportunity to play matches and to get some prize money. So the answer to the question, is the tennis season too long, is very complex, because while prize money has gone up mostly in the big tournaments, in the Grand Slams and the Masters 1000, and that is great. Also, inflation has gone up and it's more expensive to play professional tennis. At the same time that prize money has gone up, it is my opinion that sponsorship money has gone down. From some of the things that I've been able to read, for example, Nike will not pay players to wear their clothes unless they're top 20 in the world. This used to be different back in the day. So professional tennis players have to play tennis matches in order to make a living. So for the players that are not reaching the final stages of big tournaments, the season could not be long enough, because one thing that's often overlooked, we have a tournament like Cincinnati. Half of the players in the draw are out after the first round. They only play one match. And these players not only are looking to make prize money, but they're also looking to build confidence. So for these type of players that are ranked lower, that are looking to build their confidence and win matches and get prize money, they need opportunities to play. However, it is also clear that a player like Iga, who goes deep in pretty much every tournament that she plays, has a hard time handling such a season. Now, there was a tweet from Evgeny Kafelnikov, and I don't really approve of the words that he used in talking about Iga's statement that the season is too long, but I can see some of the old-timers' point of view that if they could do it back in the day where the season was basically the same, Davis Cup was played best of 5 sets, Master Series tournaments were played best of 5 sets, doubles at Grand Slams was played in best of 5 sets. Some of these guys were actually playing more, and they were playing very frequently. And of course, these players are going to be irked when they hear these young players who are making a lot more money complain about the season being too long. I get that point of view. However, the reason why Iga is complaining is the fact that she has to play mandatory tournaments. So the issue is really not with the tennis season. The tennis season is fine. We as fans, we want to watch tennis. We don't want to tune out after the US Open and then wait until the Australian Open. We want to watch tennis all year long. However, the mandatory tournaments, which makes sense by the way, because Master Series tournaments don't have to pay appearance fees. The players have to show up. Those are mandatory events. On the men's tour, I think Monte Carlo has an exemption, and a lot of players skip that one. But the real crux of the issue are mandatory events, and I don't think there's going to be any change, because when an event is mandatory, you don't have to pay any money for Iga to show up. She's going to show up because she has to. So the only solution to the problem of the season being too long for the top players is to get rid of the mandatory events or make the rules a little bit easier so that you can protect these top players from being injured. But of course, tennis is a business, and I really don't think that the mandatory event rules are going to change. Now, before I get into Sinner, TFO, and some of the other dark horses for the US Open, let me discuss the Draper incident. And for you guys that don't know, in the match between Draper and Aliassim on match point, Draper hit a really weird shot that looked like a half volley, and it clipped the net and went over, and he ended up winning the match. And the chair umpire called this a legitimate shot. Now, interestingly, Aliassim, who was all class during this drama that occurred in the match, said that this is going to be everywhere and the umpire is going to look like a fool. And I'm going to jump in and defend the umpire here. I was critical of umpires who made some horrible mistakes in some of the tournaments that I covered this year, but on this particular shot, it was really impossible to see what happened in real time. See, the fascinating thing about tennis is that things happen in milliseconds. This is, of course, true for tennis technique in itself. Things are taking place during a tennis stroke that cannot be seen with the naked eye. So when there's a controversial stroke that looks weird, it's really difficult to see with the naked eye what happened. Now, I examined the footage. Somebody on Twitter posted a super slow-mo footage, and the quality wasn't great. There were frames missing, but it appears that Draper hit the ball with the top of his frame into the ground. The ball ricocheted up and touched his racket again, and then went over the net with a really weird spin. Now, of course, when you hit the ball into the ground, you lose the point automatically. I don't have to tell you that. And the big question is whether Draper knew that this happened. We don't know if Draper knew. The only way we would be able to know is if we put ourselves in that same exact scenario. And that's going to be impossible to do because it's such a freak shot that cannot be recreated. I will say though that generally when you hit the ball twice or when you hit the ball into the ground, you are going to feel it 100%. So it is possible that Draper felt that he hit the ball into the ground or that he hit it twice. But also that play was so fast, so quick. You could also make the argument that he didn't really know what happened. And here comes the easy solution, something that I've been talking about during the Olympics and that controversial call with Coco Gauff. You have to have video replay for the umpire, and this whole drama could have been avoided. Take a look at this comment from Novak Djokovic. I think it is weird that professional tennis doesn't use video replay in circumstances like this when they use Hawkeye. It makes absolutely no sense. And it is really useless drama that can easily be avoided with modern technology. All right, now let me talk about Sinner beating Tiafoe and collecting his third Masters Series title. See, I have a feeling that the players who skip the Olympics are going to have a huge advantage at the US Open. And we're definitely seeing that in Cincinnati with Sabalenka taking the women's title and Sinner taking the men's title. Both of them have decided to skip the Olympics. I think the Olympics being on clay and being such a pressure cooker of a tournament and such a emotional tournament, I mean, I can't imagine what it feels like to be in the Olympics. I do think that it takes a lot out of the players physically and also emotionally, and it's tough to make that immediate switch and go to Canada, play a 1,000, and then play a 1,000 Cincinnati right away, and then a week break, and then the US Open. So I do think that the players who decided to skip the Olympics are going to benefit greatly at the US Open. And I have not made up my mind yet who I'm picking as the winner for the US Open. I'm going to wait until the draw comes out, but I did pick Sinner to win Wimbledon, and he's definitely one of my favorites to win the US Open title. Now, I was very pleased to see Tiafoe get his form back. He is one of the most talented players on tour. He had a rough year. He made an unfortunate comment and saying publicly that he's been losing to clowns. I do not like that comment. I don't think that you should disrespect other players on tour. The level of play is absolutely incredible. Of course, you can think that in your head. Don't say it out loud. I think a lot of players think that, but this is something that you can't say out loud and disrespect other players. But I think it is right. I think Tiafoe is above some of the other players because he has that very rare combination where there's a tremendous amount of power and athleticism, but there's also feel. It almost reminds me a little bit of Alcaraz. Tiafoe has really soft hands and he has great touch, and he of course can deliver a tremendous amount of power and is a phenomenal athlete and moves great. Tiafoe, just like the other 4 Americans who are in the top 20. There are 5 Americans in the top 20 for the first time since 1997. You can take a look at the names and you see that there is a discrepancy in the chances that these players have to take the big titles. I think the chances of any of these Americans that are in the top 5 to win the US Open, for example, or any other Grand Slam is quite low. I'm not going to single out the top Americans, even someone like Zverev, who probably thought in his head, hey, I was winning Master Series tournaments during the Big 3 era. I won the ATP Tour Finals. When Djokovic, Nadal, and Federer are retired, I'm going to start cleaning up titles. And nobody could have foreseen that the Big 3 were replaced by Sinner and Alcaraz, who pretty much play at the same level. Now, I'm not saying that they're just as good, but the level of play of Sinner and Alcaraz is for sure better than the rest of the tour. And of course, Djokovic is still there, taking titles. So it is very difficult to come through these 3 guys, Djokovic, Alcaraz, and Sinner, and collect a Grand Slam tournament. So despite Tiafoe being an unbelievable player, just like the other 4 Americans in the top 20, I think it's going to be very difficult to go all the way at the US Open. Can they go deep? Yes, they absolutely can. The 2 guys that are playing the best tennis right now are Korda and Tiafoe. And depending on the draw, they could make a run. Now, Sinner has the best win percentage this year, and I'm actually kind of surprised that it's only his 3rd Masters Series title. He's got a long way to go to catch up to Djokovic and Nadal. Alcaraz has 5 Masters Series titles, so Alcaraz has been able to get more big titles than Sinner, but I do see Sinner and Alcaraz at the same level. And I'm sure that you guys saw Alcaraz smashing a racket in what he called the worst match of his career, losing to Monfils, even though I don't think it's any shame to lose to Monfils, who took out Paperin in the first round, who won the Canada Masters the week prior. But Alcaraz did play poorly. He said that the court that he played on was a lot faster than the courts that he practiced on, and it was just a poor match from him. However, what I said before about the Olympics taking an emotional toll, I think out of all the players, the most emotional damage, so to speak, has been inflicted on Alcaraz by Djokovic. Now, of course, he can recover from this very quickly. I hope that this doesn't linger on like the Cincinnati loss last year that he had to Djokovic, where he was crying after the match and then went on a little bit of a slump all the way to Indian Wells. I'm sure that as he's getting older, as he's maturing, he's going to recognize what's happening and be able to flip it around much faster. So maybe this is one of these scenarios where it's just one bad match from Alcaraz and he's going to do quite well at the US Open. But you could also make the argument that a loss like the one he suffered against Djokovic at the Olympics can stay around in a player's head for a while, and he could enter a little bit of a slump, just like he did last year. It's very hard to predict. Let's see what happens. What is Djokovic doing? I saw him running on vacation in Croatia. I posted a pic of him running in Dubrovnik in last week's Monday morning rant. Djokovic has not played a tournament at all. The reason why he didn't play in Cincinnati is because there was an event with the Olympic athletes in Belgrade that I'm sure he had a lot of fun attending. And as Djokovic needs warm-up tournaments, so to speak, even though I don't call them warm-up tournaments, these are standalone tournaments that are extremely important. I don't think Djokovic needs those tournaments. See, the thing is that Djokovic is still ranked so high that the first 2 or 3 rounds are going to be very manageable for him. I don't see anybody outside the top 36 in the world be able to challenge Djokovic in round 1 and 2. And so the fact that he hasn't played a tournament, he can play himself into shape like he did in Wimbledon to some extent, even though that wasn't the real Djokovic. And by the time Djokovic is in the 4th round or the quarterfinals, we're going to see a Djokovic at the top of his level. But again, I got a feeling, I'm not going to make a call yet. The way Sinner played in Cincinnati, he came through that tough semifinal match against Zverev and then played a solid match against Tiafoe. I got a feeling that Sinner is going to have a good US Open.